Hello and welcome, folks. My name is Ryan Chapman, and I am the author of SANS Forensics 528, Ransomware and Cyber Extortion. I'm here today to give you an overview of our hands-on learning that we have in the course. This course is over 1/3 hands-on learning. And speaking of which, let's take a look here. We've got 4 different sections in the course. The first 3 are curriculum-based. The entire 4th section is hands-on. It's a capture the flag event. It's a very fun one, by the way, where you apply all the things that you've learned throughout the course. But first, let's talk about what you will learn in the course. And in section 1, we begin with incident response fundamentals. This is where we basically talk about what's ransomware. You know, you hear it in the news and the media, we hear it so often, but what is that? And what's the difference between ransomware and cyber extortion, for that matter? We talk about the evolution of the groups over time. We talk about the builders that are used in order to churn out this turnkey solution known as Ransomware-as-a-Service. We talk about human-operated ransomware. What does that mean? Why is that a threat? Why is that a big problem? Why do we keep seeing an increase in ransomware events year over year? You know, we go over all those things. And then we get into analysis. So the second portion of section 1 is what artifacts do you need to collect? How do you collect them? How do you parse them once you have collected them? And then what do you do then, right? How do you analyze those? That moves into section 2, ransomware modus operandi. And that is where we start talking about the attack itself. How do they begin? What's the initial infection vector or initial access? And then from there, how do they do their thing, right? How do they do their dastardly deeds? So what tools do they run? How do they get them into the environment? Those types of things. We also talk about persistence. How do they maintain access into an environment after machines have been rebooted, users have logged off, those types of things. And that takes us into a module on Cobalt Strike, which is a very popular threat actor simulation tool. It's really, really solid, but it's a little too solid. It's a little too good. The ransomware actors, they like it quite a bit. So we cover that at the end of section 2. In section 3, we go into more advanced topics. So we talk about credential access and privilege escalation. And then we get into lateral movement. How do they move from one host to the next and to the next and throughout your organization in order to find the things that they want to pilfer? And that leads right into data access and exfiltration. So how do they access your data? How do they steal your data? What tools and sources do they use? And that leads into payload deployment along with tampering products and passing your defensive systems. We get into encryption and we talk about how does encryption actually occur and why is that important to a forensic analyst? And it is very much so important. And that leads into finally a hunting section where we talk about hunting these actors within your environments. The course is structured based on tools that are widely available, easily available. You can basically take the course, go back to work, and apply exactly what you've learned. We specifically use a methodology where we cover, well, actually, we cover the methodology. We don't want to focus too much on you have to click this menu and then choose that option and then click here and then click there and then click here in this exact tool. And that's the only way that you can do it. No, forget that. We don't want to teach just the tool. We want to teach the overall process of analysis. And we use free tools and we use free and open source tools. So again, you can just leave our environment and then basically throw your mapping. How are we doing what we're doing using the tooling that we're you and our virtual machines that we provide for the course? More on that coming up. And then you apply that at work. That's our overall process. And we want to make sure that you're able to apply. We want you to apply it. We don't want this to just be a cutesy thing where you go and you read through a bunch of books and go, okay, I learned some stuff, but now I'm at work and it doesn't apply. Rather, it's exact opposite. Okay. We will be everything, the MITRE tactics. So when we talk about in class initial access, that maps to, oh, look, there's one called initial access. When we talk about execution, well, there's one called execution. You get the idea, right? I won't go through all these. So the idea is that not only do we have a wealth of information just packed into this 4-section course, but when you leave and you have all that hands-on learning that we're going to be talking about right now, you have the ability to map that into the MITRE attack framework because many of our tools, the Royal Hour tools in our InfoSec realm map to MITRE, and so we do so too. You'll be receiving 2 different virtual machines for the course. There is a Linux VM and a Windows VM, and I'll show you them right now. The Linux VM is based on SIFT. It is the SANS Investigative Forensic Toolkit. And we have a number of things that we've added into that toolkit, which I will show you right now. On the desktop, we have a bunch of posters. These are the ones that are the most relevant to this course. We kind of share the Windows Forensics poster, which is typically associated with the Forensics 500, because there's only so many artifacts in Windows and we need to analyze those. Of course, you have your ransomware and cyber extortion just waiting for the desktop so you can do as we go throughout the course. There's a number of tips and tricks and little commands that you can either run and or look for these threat actors running that are in this poster. And so we kind of map the poster and the sections to it, to the sections of the course, hence the poster's overall design. Inside the SIFT VM, you have your electronic workbook. We also have two tools that we'll be using primarily throughout the course. One of them is called TimeSketch, and it allows us to go into the Explore option and basically explore the environment. Which environment, you may ask? We'll more on that coming up very, very shortly. And then as an alternative to that, we also have Kibana. And if we go over here to Discover, I'll show you that we have our data sets. Like right now, it's loading up the Scenario 1 data set. Speaking of those data sets, the data that's been collected from our victim environment post-attack, there were two separate scenarios, two different attacks. That data is all contained within the VMs. So you don't need to connect to any type of VPN and connect into any external or remote ranges. Everything is just right there, boom, on your computer, waiting for you, very fast querying, easy to find what you want, so on and so forth. So this is the SIFT VM, and then we also have your Windows VM. So your Windows VM, as you can see, it's kind of a busy screen here. It's just chock full of tools. We've got a number of tools that are available at, for example, at the top left-hand side right here, we've got tools that you'll be using in the course and then some that are just extra. And we try to provide this to be something you could use outside of course, should you essentially be, well, hopefully you don't have to, but be investigating a ransomware investigation. If you're a consultant or you work third party like myself, then okay, great, that's awesome. If you're first party, I hope you don't have to investigate a ransomware attack, but if you do, we give you just a veritable cornucopia of tools to use. Of course, we have the Zimmerman tools from Eric Zimmerman. If you've ever taken a SANS course, many of our courses in the forensics realm at least use these tools. And again, you have your posters up here. For example, here's our little guy right there on the desktop waiting for you. So we have your labs, for example, just kind of hanging out here on the desktop waiting for you to access them and go through them. Speaking of the labs, let's go take a look at what else we have in store for you. So as I mentioned, the Windows VM has your lab files. It also has the host artifacts. So not only do we have in the Linux VM a log aggregation utility, right? Basically Elasticsearch is the backend. Not only do we have the data that's parsed in there from both of our scenarios, but we give you the raw artifacts. And we talk about, for example, in section 1, how to collect those artifacts. And so you can map the artifact manual analysis, say using Zimmerman tools or whatnot, to the methods that you would utilize in a log aggregator. And we try to make it so that no matter what type of environment you're coming from or that you'll be going into, that you'll be able to apply the tactics that we teach. We use a victim organization known as Samaran Protect, which may or may not be an amalgamation of the name Samus Aran, who may or may not be painted on my wall right behind me. But anyway, so Samaran Protect is it's an extermination company. I chose something that it seems like it's non-critical, right? We're not building nuclear silos or anything like that at this organization, but it just shows that the fallout from a ransomware attack to any type of organization can be devastating. And so in this particular situation, let's just say that there's a service level agreement of Samaran has to be in there within 2 hours to take care of some type of infestation, right? And they're not able to make it. Well, then maybe a school or a daycare has to shut down. And then what's the fallout from that? Well, all the parents would have to pick their children up. All of them are then leaving work. And then all of their tasks are undone for the day or multiple days or what have you. So Samaran is comprised of a network that includes 3 different tiers. Essentially, we have a DMZ. So in the demilitarized zone, we have a number of servers. We have an internal server. I was going to call it a server farm. It's just 3 of them hanging out in there. And then we have our workstation environment. And so throughout the labs, you'll have data acquired from this particular network post-attack so that you can see and, of course, find out exactly what occurred throughout the attacks. Speaking of the attacks, We have a situation where there are two different scenarios, and we had some humans actually go in and pretend to be like HR and other various tasks that were generating noise within the environment. So sometimes when you go through a lab in a curated environment, you'll just see the attack. Basically, it's like, oh, that's the attack. That's the attack. We didn't want that. So rather, when you're doing your hands-on learning, you will have humans doing human things throughout the day. And so it was really fun bringing a group of folks in to do that for us. Our first scenario is called Blue Locker. And these scenarios are, I used the word already, I'll use it again, an amalgamation. We basically took bits and pieces of ransomware attacks throughout the years and formed these two ransomware groups. The first one, called Blue Locker, they get in via remote desktop protocol, which is one of the most common methods that ransomware actors get in. And essentially what they do is actually, let me pause on what they do. What you do is you are going to be analyzing data from a typical environment that's not very well tooled. They don't have an EDR in place at this point for this attack, but rather for scenario 2, which is called Balrog, there's a much more sophisticated threat actor and a much more sophisticated client. So I'm saying client because I work third party. So environment, right? So in this case, we have Sysmon and we have a number of Windows event logs that have been augmented, and all that's just funneled right into Elastic and available for you to search through. And in this case, if you have an environment where you don't have a ton of tools and you're thinking, well, what would I be able to do? What would I even be able to analyze? That's what we cover in scenario 1. Rather, if you're saying, well, we're fairly sophisticated, we have an EDR, an XDR, we see process creation events, we see all these fun things, that's where scenario 2 has your back. And so the idea is that no matter what environment you're coming from, going into, that we essentially train to that. So let's talk about the hands-on analysis here. The workbook is over in, well, it's in both VMs actually, but I'm going to access the workbook in the Linux VM and just give you a quick overview of some of the things you can look forward to. Over here in the labs section, you'll see that we have a search overview, so that we don't want you to have to sit there and learn how to search through Elasticsearch. This isn't an Elasticsearch course. So we give you a number of resources to show you these are the types of commands you can run. These are the things that you do when you're trying to find X, Y, or Z. For that matter, we've also got cheat sheets. So we have a scenario 1 cheat sheet that shows the different data types that are available. And we have the same thing for scenario 2. If you want to look into the lab environment and take a look at the network diagram, then we've got that locked and loaded right here for you. And then, of course, we have the labs themselves. So each day is about a third, if you will, 33.33% exactly. I don't know about all that, but about a third hands-on analysis. So in the first section, as an example, the very first lab, you're going to be building ransomware. So I'll even show you. I just go over here to labs. I go to section 1, lab 1.1. I go into my folder, and I'm going to execute PowerShell from this location. This will be the first lab where you're basically going to be running a tool called RaaSnet. You're going to log into a builder, also known as a generator. Let me shake the window. There we go. And log in and essentially just build ransomware. So we walk you through the building process. Why are these options important? Which ones are the most common within today's ransomware attacks? And you build out the ransomware. You run the ransomware. You then are going to decrypt the environment. So it's a really fun hands-on lab to basically just start you off. We just throw you right into the deep end. It's like, we're going to build ransomware and we're going to run it right in your virtual machine. By the way, not on whatever machine you bring. That would be bad. The next lab, we show you how to acquire artifacts. So if you've ever heard of Eric Zimmerman's tool called Cape, then, or if you've never heard of it, then you're going to hear about it a lot in this course. So we're going to show you how to collect the artifacts. And then it's not just about using the tool, but it's more about reviewing the data that it processes and how to analyze that data. And this basically mimics going into an environment where there's not a ton of tools, but rather you just need to pull raw Windows artifacts off the disk and then review them. So we've got master file table analysis, we have SRUM analysis, and throughout the course, if you're not familiar with certain artifacts or concepts, we have little drop downs like this little guy right here. And we have little snippets of various posters and things of that nature to give you, just kind of augment your online learning, or unless you're in person, of course. And we go into event logs, we talk about shell bags, and then we go into shim cache. So all of this is still like midway through section 1 of the course. And then from there, after you've gone through essentially learning how to pull apart one host, we then scale things out in lab 1.3. And it's more, well, if you have to pull artifacts from a bevy of systems within your environment, well, how do you do that? How do you obtain them? How do you parse them? How do you analyze them then at scale? Because in a ransomware attack, you're not typically going to have just one or two impacted machines, right? That's not exactly how it happens. So in here, we walk you through using a tool called TimeSketch, which I think I just showed you a bit ago. We give you a breakdown on the interface, but the real thing that we want to do in this particular lab is to show you the exact artifacts that you analyzed previously in lab 1.2, where you manually analyze them. How would you access those exact things, or how would you access artifacts that tell you the same types of results? They give you the same results, basically, right? So we have, again, event logs, shell bags. There's the MFT is in here. You've got shim cache and SRUM. We have a bonus activity in many of our labs. The bonus activities are to be done outside of class time. I just couldn't stop developing, essentially. I wanted to give you a bunch of resources. So we have some bonus activities. Heck, we even have bonus labs. For that matter, when we move into section 2, we continue our at-scale analysis. And then again, it's not just learning how to use the tool. It's learning specifically how to adapt those manual artifacts that you were looking at. It all starts off really in lab 1.2. How do you map that then to another at-scale analysis environment? And so we talk about, again, event logs, MFT. I'll save the rest of them there. But you learn how to view them in disparate environments. And the idea behind that is you're not going to have an environment exactly like the one that we have in class, right? That'd be great if you went back to work and said, we're going to build one just like that based on Elastic. That'd be cool. Very, very cool. And we give you tips and tricks on how to do just that, by the way. But it's more so that when you leave the course, you have the manual artifact analysis, you have at-scale analysis in TimeSketch, and you have at-scale analysis in Kibana. And then once you have that foundation, we start getting into things like how to find the infection vector for phishing. So how to identify when Office is the application process parent, essentially, or the malicious process parent, or how to identify when zip files have been opened within the Windows operating system. Because Windows loves to just take note of every little thing that you're doing, like, oh, I saw you did this, and I saw you did this. So we'll show you all the important registry locations, show you how to access them manually via manual analysis tools, and then, of course, in the at-scale tools. We then get into, honestly, some reverse engineering. In ransomware investigations, you will often run into obfuscated scripts. And so we have 2 entire labs that walk you through analyzing PowerShell. And we want you to not have to find some code and then say, oh, I don't know how to analyze this. What am I going to do with this? And then you have to hand it off to a third-party team, maybe like legitimately third party as an external, and then wait for them to close that ticket out and respond back with a report. No, we don't need all that. If you are working a ransomware case and you run into obfuscated PowerShell or the scripts for that matter, we want you to be able to decode that. And so we walk you through that process 2 different times. We start with a primer, and then lab 2.4 goes into decoding a Cobalt Strike payload. We go over it in 2 different ways because the tool itself is not the end all be all, right? It's the process and the method. So we show you how to use a GUI-based tool, CyberChef, which you may have heard about before. And then we also have a bonus activity, which walks you through the entire process through the terminal. And so you'll go through the terminal and look, we give a breakdown of how to use terminal-based commands and essentially just rip apart the code so that next time you run into it or something very similar to Cobalt Strike, because so many of these different post-exploit frameworks use essentially the same little code structures. You see them all the time, and you'll be able to decode those. We even have a bonus lab. Lab 2.5 is not done in class time. There's nowhere near enough time, but we have an entire lab for you to do outside of class time. And of course, if you take the course on demand, then you can, go through it whenever you want. So we hunt through RDP. We look for remote logins. We look for brute forcing. We look for rogue workstation names that shouldn't be logging in, all kinds of fun stuff. And that leads into section 3, where we start going through the tail end of the attack after the threat actor has gotten into the environment. So we start off with lateral movement. We talk about lateral movement via RDP. So this one is structured a little more question answer based because by section 3, you've learned all the ins and outs of our tooling and our systems. So we just jump right into questions. And we also talk about PS exec lateral movement. For that matter, there's another bonus lab. Talking about it, it makes me feel kind of funny. I'm like, wow, I really overdeveloped here, but that's fine because I wanted to provide even more lateral movement analysis. And then you have the ability to look through, well, when a Cobalt Strike beacon is being utilized and various protocols are being then used, like SMB and various tooling and methods like WinRS, the Windows Remote Shell, how do you track all those types of lateral movement? And that's in an entirely separate bonus lab. We also have identifying data access and exfil because, hey, we all know that threat actors these days, cyber extortion specifically, they want to get into your environment and they want to steal your data. How do they do that? And how do you identify that? How can you prevent that? How can you hunt for that happening in your environment? That's what we cover in Lab 3.2. And that leads into Lab 3.3, which is hunting. We talk about how to hunt for things like PS tools being used in your environment. We talk about looking for renamed portable executables or .exes basically because threat actors love to rename them, but they don't change certain things like a resource called version info. And that allows you to identify, oh, this actually is program X. It's just been renamed to, so-and-so. So I'll digress here. There's a lot to digest in the course. And I really, really hope that folks find this interesting and want to join us. If you have any comments or questions or whatnot, you can learn more about the class. You can contact us or me directly. My information is here on the slide. It's just, I'm also RJ_chap on X or Twitter, if you will. So if you'd like to take a course demo, you can simply go to sans.org/FOR528. Hit enter on that bad boy and you'll be able to take a course demo and just basically see part of the course in action. And of course, grab the ransomware and cyber extortion poster if you don't already have a copy of that, because there's a ton of tips and tricks that are in there. Through viewing that poster, you'll think, wow, there's a lot of hands-on stuff in this course, and there really, really is. So I'm glad I got to show some of that off, and I would love to see you someday in the course. Again, my name is Ryan Chapman, author of 528, Ransomware and Cyber Extortion, signing off.